My name is Mohammed Amin Adam. I'm the Executive Director of the Africa Center for Energy Policy. This is Amin's Take, and we are going to explore issues relating to the power sector of our country, which has faced some challenges lately. And so it appears that there is no end in sight to the doomsday that we are experiencing as the challenges continue to confront our institutions such as VRA, ECG, GRIDCO, and the PURC. VRA and ECG both say they are doing well. They are doing their best for the country, but consumers say that their best is not best enough. Some others think that whether they are doing well or not, all they need is power, reliable power supply to their homes, to their factories, to their workplaces. But what is causing this? What has brought us this far? What is the way forward? We'll explore today with two experts, energy experts. My guest, the first of who is Mr. Samuel Fletcher, the Corporate Communications Director of Volta River Authority. And then my second guest, Mr. Ishmael Ejekumhini, who is the Executive Director of KITE, Kumasi Institute of Technology and Environment, based in Accra. So these two gentlemen will help us explore the probing issues affecting our energy sector in order for us to find a way to get out of the doomsday that is afflicting all of us in our homes and in factories. This is Amin's Take, and I would like to welcome my guest to this important forum. We are going to discuss, as I said earlier, issues relating to the power sector, right from generation challenges through to transmission, distribution challenges, but also fuel supply security challenges, and as well as tariff issues, which are all very important issues that we need to be addressing if we have to solve the problems associated with the power sector. I would like to begin with Mr. Sam Fletcher. I know you have been involved in discussions around the country since the problems started. And so I would like to know from you, what is the state of affairs currently? Where are we? Should we have hope? Should we sit in despair? What do you have to say about that?
Thank you very much. Our current state of affairs, we have challenges in the system, and challenges that I believe we, going forward, will enumerate in the discussion. But our state of affairs, I wouldn't call it hopeless. I can confidently tell you that at some point we'll get out if we do things right.
But what do you think are the main causes of these challenges that we are faced with in the energy sector? Certainly, most people are not happy about the energy sector. And so we need to be communicating effectively to Ghanaians what the causes are in order that they will bear with us, they will understand where we are coming from. What do you think are the main causes?
Historically, I think one of the main things that we need to consider, is where we were before we got to where we are. You and I know that when the Akosomo Dam was built at that time, Ghana needed just about 60% of the capacity of the dam at the time. Obviously, because of very low population, not many people were actually hooked to the national grid. But then with time, as the population grew and as small-scale businesses grew, as economic development started in the country, all these businesses were getting hooked up to the grid. And one can say that at some point, we may, as a country, all have gone to sleep, knowing that we had enough to the extent that we were even exporting, knowing that we had enough, only to realize that because of economic development, demand is shooting above supply. Population is growing at a very fast rate. People who hitherto will be staying in their parents' house now have their own houses. People who hitherto will be working for one company now have their own companies that are employing 5, 10 people. They're all drawing capacity from the same base load that we have. So demand is very important in this discussion. And today our demand is anything between 10 and 12% a year, as compared to the African average of about 3%.
Wow.
Now, that is huge for a country like Ghana with 25 million people.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is a major factor. The other factor which we need to talk about is the fact that investment in the power sector specifically have been slow.
Yeah.
We all have to admit, no one particular person can be blamed. But generally speaking, investment have been slow. They haven't been as robust enough to keep the supply end going. Again, I don't think our tariff regimes have been things that have helped us at all. And although we're still where we are, at some point we need to start, thinking that if we want electricity, we must pay for it. I mean, as to how we pay for it, that is a whole discussion on its own. But if we want electricity, it is expensive and we have to pay for it. I mean, you can't produce electricity at a cost, even at a weighted average cost of, say, 22 pesos and get 11 pesos for it and expect that you will stay in business.
Yeah, Mr. Fletcher, I think you have laid a very good foundation for a comprehensive discussion on the issues. I mean, issues of tariffs, issues of demand, but also low levels of investment. Ishmael, what do you think are the causes why we are here, why we are with these problems? What do you think?
Well,
should we have hope, or we should be hopeless?
Thank you. I mean, Mr. Fletcher said it's not a hopeless situation. I hope so. But I think we are in very, very serious situation. I know these days the word challenge has been overused and has been abused. The fact of the matter is that I don't remember the last time we had load shedding of up to 14 hours a day. This morning they said my lights were going to go off at 6. It went off around 20 minutes to 6. First and foremost, it was so inconveniencing. But we have serious problems. And the problems we have today, they are because of things that we did in the past or things that we didn't do in the past. Yeah. We're only reaping what we have sown. Mr. Fletcher alluded to the fact that investments have been slow. I think they have been extremely slow, and they haven't tended, or investments haven't tended to respond to glaring increases in demand. And the fact that certain decisions that we ought to have taken 5 years ago that we didn't take are here to haunt us. And decisions that we ought to take today, if we don't take them today, we're going to have serious situations in the future. But I think Mr. Fletcher said we shouldn't put blames, but obviously some people ought to be blamed. And I think I wouldn't blame it so much on the generators, because I know BRA has a planning unit. All they do is that they do these projections and they tell us how many megawatts that we need to add. The bottom line is investment. I've heard Mr. Fletcher talking about the POM project, that they are around 80% complete. The truth of the matter, POM started how many years ago?
What is the POM project?
Is
Are you talking about the retrofit?
No, the POM.
The POM.
Let's get the difference.
The
POM and POM.
The
POM is
okay.
Okay. But
POM is
in the Tema area, Community 25 area.
Yes, the POM that maybe I'm not a gun.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Maybe but it goes back, way back 2008, 2009, okay? And if it's taking us this long, it's not because we didn't know we needed a plant. It's the investment that... So the current situation is dire, and with the problems that we likely going to see with Akosombo and all if Akosombo slashes its load, its capacity, then obviously we are in real problem. And unfortunately, there are no quick fixes. So I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to talk about it. But
just a little to add to what he said on the KTP, the Pong project, is indeed, it depends on where you stand. You'd say it started 2009. That's true. Those machines came into the country in 2009. But actually, officially, these machines were handed over to VRA in 2012. So we started working on it October 2012. Actually, this is actually the 24th month in which we are. The project was supposed to take 24 months, but because of some funding gap at some point, it was extended by another 4 months. So in December, the project will be completed.
Okay. I mean, for the benefit of those who are watching us, Pong hydroelectric, plant is going through retrofitting program, which will add up some 40 more megawatt to the capacity of the plant. But the other one is Pong in the western region, I believe.
No, Pong is actually in Tema. It's close to Tema.
Which is supposed to add 220
That is 220
megawatt. Yeah, it's a thermal plant. So there are differences here.
Yeah.
Pong hydroelectric plant is different from the Pong thermal power plant, which is being
a very difficult name to pronounce.
But Mr. Fletcher, you talked about demand-supply gap. I want to come back on that. I know that we have a total installed capacity of about 2,840, and the peak demand is just about 2,000 or 2,100. And so under normal circumstances, if you match our installed capacity against our peak demand, we should have a reserve, a surplus of about 700 megawatt. So why should that be a problem? Why should demand be a problem?
Okay, I can explain that. First of all, when we say 2,800 installed capacity, what we work with is actually what we normally call dependable capacity. So all these machines are configured to work, to the maximum capacity, all conditions being equal. And you and I know that these machines, especially when they're in the tropics, you can't get everything out of it. So for example, if you take Akosombo, it's 1,020 megawatts. I think the highest we have done even under very high pressure is about 900, 950. You just can't get everything out of it. So we make calculations with installed capacity by saying 2,800. But if you look at our dependable capacity, it's anything around 2,400. But even that, if our peak demand is 2,100, we still should be able to have some reserve. Okay? But again, when you look at the plant, you look at how much energy you get from them in terms of kilowatt hours. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If you take Bui, we say that installed capacity is 399, which is 400. If you take Pong or Pong Akuse, installed capacity is 160. Okay, but annually, the energy you get from Bui is equal to the energy you get from Pong. You understand my point? So we work with the energy that you get. So, for example, Akosomo, recently we have talked about cutting back on hydro generation, because ideally, Akosomo should be doing about 5,300. Anytime the thermals are not performing the way they should, Akosomo overworks and gets about 7,800 and things like that. So I think it is best to calculate it in the amount of energy you get from these plants. So we, for example, is 400, but really, how much energy do you get from it? So that is why the situation is as it is. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think that both of you are right when you talked about low investment in the power sector being a very serious challenge. But how do we address the investment challenge? I mean, does government, have the money to invest? VRA, do you have the money to invest? Ishmael, we're talking about attracting independent power producers, but we all know that the issue of fuel is number one, the issue of tariffs is the other. So Ishmael, let me come to you. How do we address the investment challenge? Do you think there is something we need to do, something we are not doing, which we have to do to be able to attract, the independent power producers?
The independent power producers, they are profit maximizers. They seek profit. and their funds have alternative uses. The reason why we open up our power sector since 1997, and not many of them are here, presupposes that there are certain inhibiting factors.
Yes.
Obviously, when I come invest my money, I know what I expect by way of return on my investment. And the return on the investment is determined by the price at which I get my product sold. So when I'm negotiating a power purchase agreement, the price will have to be fixed in there, and it should be the price that will give me the comfort that at the end of the day, I'll get the returns that I need. Over the years, I think we haven't done well as far as our tariffs are concerned. And it is even more critical when you consider the fact that our tariffs are CD denominated. You take the most recent tariff increases and you look at the real value as at today, you realize that it has devalued. So sometimes some of these tariff increases are only correcting for the CD depreciation. They are really not doing much. So when the private sector comes in, they look at how much you're ready to offer them. They look at the average end user tariff, they look at what they can negotiate with PURC, and sometimes not very, very attractive. The other problem, apart from the tariff and the fact that the tariff don't seem to give them a lot of incentive to come in, is who takes the power they produce. We've struggled with this issue of what they call a credible off-taker. Somebody who would sign up and say that I'm going to take the 400 megawatts that you're going to produce, I sign an agreement with you for 25 years, and I'm going to pay you. Okay. Over the years, ECG has tended to become the off-taker, and sometimes they are the ones who sign the power purchase agreements. But Asogli will tell you that ECG is not even paying up. Okay. VRA will tell you they have issues with payment. So it tells you that we don't have a credible off-taker at the moment in the country. Everybody comes in, they're looking, apart from the power purchase agreement, they're still looking for sovereign guarantees. They want the government to sign an undertaking that if ECG is not able to pay, you pay us. And the government is not too willing to do that because the government doesn't have the means to support that. So that's the problem that we have now. A lot of people have been knocking on Mr. Fletcher's doors. They've been knocking on ECG's door. There are a lot of, go to Energy Commission, go to the people who see the number of people who are obtaining licenses, then they want to come and produce, whether it's renewable, whether it's conventional. But the bottom line is that somebody has to buy the power. The people are not interested in retailing their power. Somebody has to buy the power in bulk. And at the end of the month, they invoice and they are paid. Okay? ECG and VRA, they have a funny way of balancing their books.
The clearinghouse.
They have a clearinghouse system.
Which is suspended
for money.
Exactly, exactly. So that's the bottom line. Apart from the, if you factor in ECG's inefficiencies, and you factor in the fact that they are unable to collect 100%, and already there is 30% system losses. Means it's starting from 70%. And if they are not able to collect, then
it's 21% losses.
Okay, whatever it is, you produce, you buy power, and before you start selling, 21% is gone. It means that you can only sell and make your money out of the 81%, isn't it? Or 89%, or 79%. So that's the real problem. Nobody will come in and produce power unless there's an off-taker. At the moment, it looks like ECG. The mines or the other bulk suppliers could have been the off-takers. But unfortunately, they also have, let's say they have an arrangement with VRA, and VRA is able to offer them something reasonable because they're able to balance it with hydro. But if it's purely thermal, none of the mine reserve plan that they are talking about was brought in by the mining companies. And they couldn't run it. They say, VRA, come and take it. You know, it's almost like a dash. Why wouldn't they run it? 80 megawatts. They've given it back to you. They've managed to retrofit it.
But Ishmael, let me cut you here. ECG has proven capable of being a credible off-taker. They are going for the barges, the mobile barges that will seek to bring in some 450 megawatt of power.
And he said
they are creating two escrows. One escrow to guarantee that they will pay for the power if supplied. Why do you say they are not? ECG is not a credible offtake.
Well,
if they can do this to bring in the badges,
we wait to see. I'm sure you probably need to know the kind of guarantees behind whatever escrows they are.
But I think what he's saying is absolutely true. And every stakeholder in this business understands that we have huge challenges at the distribution level. And let me give you an example. TICO in Takrady is actually a joint venture between VRA and TACA of Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
VRA is the off-taker of the power from TICO. Have you ever heard TICO complaining? No. See, but we have our own challenges when it comes to collection. You know, our challenges when it comes to being given what we are supposed to be given at the end of the month. VRA is not the only one complaining. Gridco is complaining. Asogli is complaining.
Senate.
I'm sure they are the Senate. I'm sure they are. So really, these are issues. And see, the only time we can solve these problems and address them is when we admit that it's an issue. And it's a big issue. See, my brother, if the losses that we have in the system continue, with time, they will grow even bigger. What it means is that we can talk about building capacity, spending so much money in investment, looking for fuel security, making sure that the power is there. But we keep wasting 30 to 40%. And you're telling me that in 10 years' time, you will still have your 5,000 megawatts that you're talking about. You won't. It's like fetching water with basket. So really, we need to modify our attitude. And we need to admit some of the major hardcore challenges that we have. Because otherwise, really, we can't solve the problem.
I think we are facing the issue squarely. But I would like us to take a short break. And when we come back, I will ask you what amount of investment we need. How do we get out of the load shedding that we are going through today? Ask you, when are we going to get out of this situation? Because if you ask anybody in the street, the person is not interested in the technicalities we are discussing here. All that they are interested in is how do we get out of this situation? So how much investment do we need? How much megawatts do we need? You know, to be able, and within what period of time?
Maybe I have to start with an illustration. Before that, any stable, performing, effective power system has a minimum of 20% on top of your peak demand as a reserve. So now 20%, I'm actually being conservative. Others say 30%. But let's work with 20%. I mean, given where we are. Now, today, at every point in time, we seem to have a deficit of anything between 150 and 300. The first thing we have to do, all our investments and fuel security we are looking for, all the projects we are building today should seek to plug that deficit of 300 megawatts. But not just to plug the deficit. Now, if you plug the deficit and you don't have your reserve, you're still in your problem. Because as soon as you have to go and do maintenance work, you have to go back to load relief. So first of all, we have to plug that deficit. And if you look at the work we are doing at Pong, it's 220 megawatts. And it's costing us $220 million. So my simple economics is that 1 megawatt is costing $1 million. So if we are looking to plug 300 megawatts as a deficit, we need $300 million. And we need time. We need about a minimum of 3 years to finish the project. Okay? So it's not just about the money, but it's also time that you need to finish the project. But that is number one, the plugging the deficit. The second part is the reserve. Now, that is where I use my illustration that if you are driving a brand new car and you have 4 brand new tires, chances are, in fact, 99% of the time, you will go to Takrady or Kumasi and come back. Okay? No problem. Because everything is brand new. But you don't have a spare tire. The day that your tire breaks on your way to Kumasi, maybe at Nkoko, you are stuck. You don't have a spare tire. You are stuck completely. And that's the situation in which we are. Our power sector does not have that reserve, which you can relate to a spare tire. So we need to invest. If our peak demand is 2,000, we need to have an investment into another 400 megawatts minimum on top of that peak demand. Now, once you have that, I'll be able to tell you that there's no
when you don't have the money.
Exactly, because you wouldn't, by this time, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about dumso, because when you have your reserve, nobody's light goes off. What happens is that this machine is out for maintenance. It is planned that this one comes on to replace what we'll be losing from here. You see, so that is the challenge. If you are looking at currently, if we are looking at having covering our peak demand of 2,000, which keeps growing every year.
Yes.
12 months from now, we will need another 200, you know, to add to it. So you plan it if you're going to build 3 projects or 4 projects that will give you, plug your deficit 300 and give you another 400. That's about 700. You don't go and do 200 every year. You will not catch up because the project will take you 3 years. So you start 3 or 4 projects that will give you, at the end of 3 years, will give you about 800 to 1,000. Then you would have plugged your deficit, and you also have, you know, if you like, gotten your reserve, or even more than that. Now, if it's 1,000 megawatts you are looking for, let's say we work with $1 million per megawatt.
Yeah.
We can do the math.
Wow. But I think that the main problem we have today is because government has not been truthful with Ghanaians. This is why you have heard promises after promises. Is it that the utilities are not briefing the president well, to the extent that the president can go out there and make a promise, do so will be over, you know, or simply there is no political will to inform the citizens what the state of affairs are? Because what we are doing is that unless we are able to get the citizens to build confidence in the system, we are going to be where we are today. And so I think that if we can declare 3 years of crisis, I think 3 years is even small. 5 years of crisis, and then we take our time to do proper adjustment, to do proper planning. Because I think one of the issues we are confronted with is poor planning. Why has it taken us how many years, 3, 4, getting to 4 years, to complete the Atuabu gas project? When we know that Nigeria gas is not enough, we need our own indigenous gas to complement what Nigeria is giving us. But it took us about 3 years, going to 4 years, when the plan could have been done in 2 years. So what did
I won't go into the politics of it. Obviously, my position is as a technocrat. I'll probably leave Ishmael to continue
as industry
on that
watcher,
end.
yes.
But the point I want to make and probably clarify is that I don't think it will be fair for us to say that government has not been truthful. And especially because you mentioned that the president makes promises and they don't come true, okay? Here's what I would say. Every single person in this business, including you, myself, Ishmael, the president, the PURC, VRA, GRIDCO, ECG, Energy Commission, the ministry, talk about all the players in this business, means well for the sector. They all mean well. I don't think there's anybody out there who doesn't mean well for the sector in the work they do. They do. But for example, if I go to brief the president, today, as I speak to you, we are receiving 135 million standard cubic feet of gas from Nigeria. Now, since Sunday, we have broken that record of not receiving the contractual volumes.
Wow.
It started with 148 million on Sunday, 145 on Monday, 144 yesterday. Today is 135. It's still beyond the contractual volumes.
The contractual volume is the minimum.
123.
Right? Is the minimum.
There's 120. Exactly.
Yeah, it's minimum, so they can go above that.
Well, you haven't seen the contractual volume ever since you signed the contract. So I'm just telling you that this is some kind of record. We still need to watch it. This is Nigeria.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I'm saying is that if today I go to brief the president, that Mr. President, we are receiving more than the contractual volumes. So this is good news. Go and tell the people of Ghana. And Mr. President sees the fact. It's on paper. He sees it, that this is how much we are receiving. He goes there and announces to the people of Ghana. The next day, Nigeria announces a force majeure or a strike action and says, friends, we are not giving you gas anymore. Immediately, everybody will start saying, oh, but the president said yesterday that we are receiving so much. You see, That doesn't mean the president told a lie. And I'm not speaking for government at all. I just think that it's fair that I explain how these things, because you mentioned whether we brief the president or not. There are major things that are not under our control. Okay, so gas from Nigeria is not under our control. Even crude oil that we buy from Nigeria, they are not under our control. When the water level is not rising, who do you blame? So the sector is faced with some of these challenges, and because you mean well, you want to calm down Ghanaians, tell them good news, and then you find out that
what indeed is not good news.
You understand my point? So I think that is where I wanted to clarify that. I don't think that the president doesn't mean well when he goes out to present some of these briefings.
But Ishmael, I mean, we are all talking about the challenges. Hydro is not, under our control. Crude oil is not under our control. Gas from Nigeria is also not under our control.
Gas from Ghana will be under our control.
So Ishmael, but to the ordinary consumer out there, the factories that want power, the lack of which is causing job losses, it's affecting productivity, economic growth is suffering, what are the alternatives? What do you think we have to do? Because we can't rely on all these, that variables Sir Fletcher mentioned. Okay. I know that you're an expert, in renewable energy. Some people have said that we should go solar, we should go wind. What do you think?
Before I go to alternatives, I think Mr. Fletcher said he won't say some of the things that because, but I think I as an industry watcher, I will say some of the things. I don't think anybody sets up to deceive the public. That one I want to put that on record. And I also agree that most of them mean well. But you see, most of the time what we do is that we try to water down the political implication of some of our indecisions. And I think that's a fact. And even today, we're still trying to make some political gains as far as the problem is concerned. And that's I think Ghanaians have gotten to a stage where they are getting tired. I told some radio stations yesterday that I'm tired talking about these things. Because some of the things that we started talking about 10 years ago, they are the same things that we're talking about. How can a country have series of crisis upon crisis, and it's almost like a cycle, and we can't fix it? It doesn't speak well of us. So yes, some of the problems are beyond us. We don't determine how much rain comes in, but we know that the inflows into the Akosombo, they are cyclical. You know that after 5-6 years, you shouldn't expect a lot of rain. Why would we sit down for the water levels to get to the critical levels before we start looking at power budgets? It goes back to our inability to take the most important decisions. I wouldn't say lack of planning. We have one of the best plans. The Energy Commission is doing all their long-term forecasts. The VRA has a whole planning unit, ECG, they all have. But when you put a plan down, there's no money to go and build the plants. The plans are useless. So really, and again, I'm surprised we still talk about Nigeria in 2014. We've known right from the beginning that we've signed a contract that there is a lot of incentive for the people to break the contract and to honor the contract. Why? Because the penalties in that contract, they are not stringent enough, and they're better off breaching the contract than honoring the contract. You see, and you can't force them, because it's almost like saying that, okay, I mean, let me abrogate the contract. Who cares? Check the Nigerian exports of LNG since we signed the West African Gas Pipeline Treaty. LNG is going up. They tell us they don't have the gas. I mean, I was in Abuja when the Nigerians told us that you Ghanaians, you are joking. I mean, they told us, even though they tried to put the VRA-based demand, the contractual demand, under what they call the domestic demand when they were doing their gas master plan. They don't understand why Ghanaians should enjoy power when they are
domestic supply obligation.
So they put the WAPCO thing under that under the master plan, but they are not honoring it. So back to what you said, why would we sit down when we've always known that Jubilee has associated gas? When we've known from day one that we need to deal with the gas? Why would we sit down as a people and waste 3 years just figuring out who comes in to build a plant, only for us to go in for an expensive option? Mind you, the World Bank was prepared to give us a concessionary loan to build the gas.
Yeah.
Why did we have to wait until we go to China? And look at what is going on. So this one, it's a political issue. It's got nothing to do with seasonal fluctuations and issues like that. And maybe Mr. Fletcher will not tell us. Sometimes the plants in Takoradi are not running, not because they are maintenance schedules, but because there are no crude to power the plants.
Wow.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So sometimes...
Certainly you will not agree.
Sometimes the safest is to tell Ghanaians that the plants have developed a problem. They will tell you the amount of money they need to bring in the crude. Yeah. And I'm saying that sometimes VRA, if the government doesn't bail VRA out, they don't have the money to import. VRA used to be very, very financially sound. When they were doing the TICOs and the TAPCOs, they could go out there and negotiate their own loans because they have good balance of payment. Now VRA is not as good as healthy as they used to be. So sometimes the plants are not running, not because the plans are not working.
I think you should be commending Ishmael. He's
sometimes
telling the government what you not
sometimes the bottom line is that they don't have enough cargo to run the plants, and sometimes it takes a long time before monies. How do they call LCs are raised and the cargoes are brought in. So some of the problems we have to deal with that, but VRA is not in the position to do that because repeatedly they tell us that they produce at X amount, they're not getting the money back.
Wow.
But I need to, I mean, he's made some very, very valid points. Yeah. One other thing I need to clear, and you see sometimes we need to be fair. I know that in 2012 and 2013, I mean, that's as long as I've been with VRA, okay, that 2012 and 2013, we received so much support from government in terms of crude oil purchases. We did, a lot. In fact, at some point, the last time we checked, it was a little in excess. So we need to make that clear.
Okay. So I mean, back to the point. You're talking about alternatives.
Maybe we should take a break here.
Okay.
And then when we come back, you can talk about alternatives and then conservation issues and the way forward. Welcome back. I still have my guest. We are engaging very seriously what can take our country forward. So Mr. Fletcher is from VRA, and then Ishmael is from Kite. Ishmael, before you take the question on alternative sources, I want to observe that it's like we've relied on hydro for long. And speaking to people about power challenges, they tell you that we have many dams. Why don't we go and develop them into hydro plants? When we go in for expensive thermal plants. But I always say that we don't have enough that we can get from hydro any longer. Yeah. Because the total potential, I understand, is about 2,500 megawatt. Now, 1,600 megawatt is out from Bui, Akosombo, and Pong. And so the 900 megawatt left are scattered across so many sites. I understand about 21, small dams.
The biggest one of them is actually 90 megawatts in Juale.
90 megawatt.
And then the next one is 50 in Kwalugu. The rest are 25.
And then if you look at the Renewable Energy Act, any plant, hydro plant, that will give you less than 100 megawatt is considered a renewable energy source. And so that brings me to the question of alternative sources. And so as I said, we can no longer rely on hydro. Hydro is out. Thermal is the other way to go. But light crude oil, fired thermal plant are not sustainable because they are so expensive. Now, gas, we are having challenges. Nigeria is not giving us enough. So we cannot rely on Nigeria. They are not likely to increase their supply. I'm sure they will come back to 30 million standard cubic feet in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Our own indigenous gas is also not enough. 120 million standard cubic feet at peak. I understand VRA estimates your demand for gas at around 400 million standard cubic feet.
Close to that.
But if you add
360,
if you add Nigeria, even if they give us the contract quantity to what is coming from Atoabu, also 120.
We still need
talking about
other sources,
240.
LNG, facilities to make.
So we certainly need some other sources. Now, what are those sources apart from LNG? What do you think, Ishmael, we can do to solve this problem?
Okay, I think we have, Mr. Fletcher talked about plugging the gap.
Yeah.
That one you can look at renewables. I mean, VRA did this solar grid connected system up north. For the 2 megawatts, we spent like $8 million US. So again, by simple mathematics, just work out the cost per kilowatt hour from solar. Solar is good. I promote renewables, but we have challenges now that we need to deal with. I think and as you rightly said, the hydro, we've exhausted most of our large hydro sites. What we have are medium to small scale hydro plants, plus the flows as they knew them long ago. Most of them have changed. Some of these rivers, they dry up. Some of them, they are so low that even Bui was struggling when they tried to create a reservoir. So I think we can look at hydro as something to just decentralize systems that we use for promote agriculture in those areas where you supply some of these. I think thermal is the way. And I think we need to fast track the LNG solution, because if you have good contracts, you have LNG, you have LNG regasification facility in Ghana. And you sign contract, you have your LCs, they bring the LNG in. We need to fast track. Again, that's where my frustration is. We started talking about LNG in 2010, 2011. Feasibility studies upon feasibility. What is delaying the process? Because we know that light crude, we cannot have the money to do that. Why not going in for this regasification facility so that we can bring in LNG, so that we have enough gas in the system to power the plants as and when they are built? LNG is crucial. But I think whilst we figure out how to solve all these generation problems, it is extremely important that we look at the demand side. Energy efficiency, we are joking. The inefficiencies in the system is so huge. I mean, you come to even this studio and you want to do energy audit, the power consumption in this place, we can reduce it by a minimum of 40%. You do proper energy audit in this studio, it might mean that they might have to change their cameras, they might have to change so many things, but they are cutting them down. Ghana has an interesting load profile. Majority of our loads are coming from the residential sector. And we are only about the only country, country where the industrial or consumers are subsidizing residential countries.
I mean,
it should have been the other way around.
It should be the other way around.
You know, but we are also so poor, or relatively, we say we are poor, so we are unable to charge realistic tariffs, and because of that, we are where we are now. So in terms of the solutions, we need to get the LNG regasification facility immediately, get that in place, so that when we can't get gas from Atuabo and Nigeria, we can import LNG and regasify them and use them. But the plants should be there to run on the gas as and when they are available. So we need to invest in the generation side. But as we talk, we seem to have forgotten about our good friends ECG, because even as we speak now, even if the peak demand is guaranteed and we're able to meet that, you can't guarantee that when you get home this evening and the generation side doesn't have a problem, ECG can guarantee that you have power. So the distribution network will have to be looked at critically to guarantee supply. So we need to get this.
It needs a complete overhaul.
It needs a complete overhaul. What some of the things they are doing there, sometimes they are more than magicians. Underground cables that have been cut and connected like 10 times, you can't run a power system like that. Okay, and sometimes it's a miracle they're able to keep the system running. They need massive investment. But I can't end without talking about renewables, otherwise I'll be fired. You know, there's a place for that. There's a space for that. But we don't have to look at it as the solution. Go to the places where the countries where they've done well with renewables, the Germanys, the Spains, the Australias.
If you can clarify what renewables are.
Okay, so the renewables, we're talking about solar, we're talking about wind, we're talking about ECG says they are almost at the advanced stage.
Stuff like
yes, I am all for. I'm always looking at biomass sources of energy. I mean, and I like it because we have
from cow dung. From
cow dung, we don't seem to have enough because of our husbandry practices in Ghana. They are free ranging, whereas in India you keep them in places where you can gather the dung and then you'll be able to. But I'm talking about municipal waste.
Okay.
I'm talking about waste to energy projects. And why am I interested in that? Because we can't deal with the waste. We have a problem on our hands. KMA is crying. Meanwhile, there are solutions that will solve the sanitation problems and also give us energy. And go tell the people who are trying to collect garbage to produce electricity, go ask them the kind of challenges they're going through. Because there are stakes. There are people at the AMAs and places like that who have bought trucks that are cutting garbage. They won't give it to you. Some people are prepared to collect them for free.
Wow. So, Ishmael, let me put it straight to you.
But nobody will give them.
A lot of people out there think that we have so much sunlight. And so why are you not putting premium on solar?
Because solar is simple. Solar at this current price is still relatively a bit expensive. You look at the feed-in tariff that has been gazetted by PURC. Even with the rate that the investors are still complaining, that's around, at the time it was passed, it was around 40 cents, between 40 and 50 cents.
Actually, it's about, in terms of dollar cents, right?
No, this was, at the time they did it in pesos.
Yes.
That was about
it's
40.
11?
Yes.
It's $11.
Yes,
No,
but
cents,
at the time, it was the equivalent of about 22 cents.
22 cents, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
At the time that, if you look at the exchange rate at the time.
Okay.
Now the people are saying that they can't do anything with that, because if it's CD denominated, 40 pesos,
it's gone down.
It's gone down completely. But solar is expensive. I cited a VRA example where the 2 megawatt power plant in Navrongo, it cost us about $8 million US.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have, and mind you, it's covering about 4 hectares.
Yeah. About 2 football stadia.
It takes
exactly
a lot of space.
Where are we going to put all of these panels?
Let me end you there.
You know, where are we going to put all the panels?
To those watching us, we cannot rely on solar. Solar can help, but it is not the solution.
Exactly.
Renewable can help, but it is not the solution. You also said that ECG is doing miracle. Working with the kind of
the infrastructure they have.
Yeah,
so I hope those who are watching us take note of this. But Mr. Fletcher, you were talking about LNG versus light crude oil, and you also mentioned the efforts VRA is making to address the fuel supply security.
Yes. I was talking about the fact that even if LNG is, in terms of pricing, is close to the price of crude oil, it is still a better option because it's a better fuel. Yeah. It's a finer fuel. They are good for the plants. Okay. But what I said was that VRA has actually gone out of its way to sign a gas sales agreement with a company called Gasol, who will be supplying us LNG from Benin, because they will have their facility there. They will do the regasification and then pump it through the West African gas pipeline to us. We are in discussion with a company called Network Oil. They have their own gas fields in Nigeria. They will also be pumping, gas from the ground in Nigeria itself. It's a natural gas. That one is not LNG. Okay. And we're almost done with the gas sales agreement. There's just a few legal issues they are looking at, and that will be done. We are talking to Sahara Oil. They can give us gas. We're talking to Constant Capital. They can give us gas. Wow. So we're saying that these are small private companies that may even be more serious than public sector companies. And once they sign agreement, they will respect these agreements, because of course they come in to make money and to.
What about the quantum power project?
Is it not of interest to you? Oh, it is. I'm not talking about it now. You mean the quantum power project? I'm not talking about it now because I don't have all the details, and I tend to not to talk about things that you don't have details about. It saves your reputation.
Granted.
but it's an important one. The GE 1000 project will come with its own LNG facility.
I know that coming, because if we get GE 1000 megawatts,
that's huge.
That's huge.
Coming? I know that there's been a feasibility study on the LNG facility, which will be set up in Abuazi. That feasibility study has been done already. Actually, out of the money that we got for the Compact 2, part of that money has been used to do that feasibility studies. I as to whether it is that same money that will be used for the LNG facility itself, I wouldn't be able to tell. But I know that part of it has gone into that study. So, like I said, we will get out of our problems it will take some time. It takes patience, understanding, hard work on our part as operators, and obviously investment on any other person or any other organization's part as those who have that responsibility to make sure we get that investment.
So Ishmael, I'd like us to, wrap up at this stage after such a very elaborate, comprehensive discussions about the power sector. What do we think we should do now? I mean, I want to come back with the first question I asked. Should we leave here hopeful that we will smile very soon, or we should go out there, tight-fisted, in anticipation that the problem would take much longer time than we ever thought?
And I would also respond by restating what I said earlier on. There is hope if we take the decisions that we need to take.
And you can add your final words.
Yes, there is hope if we take the decisions that we need to take now. It is clear, and nobody should be kidding himself or herself, that we're not going to get out of the woods that quick, but efforts are underway. But we need to brace ourselves for perhaps a lot more tougher times. But we can get out of it if we take the decisions that we need to take now. That, of course, includes taking a very hard look at the tariff, because it has a bearing on everything that the investors are looking at, and we need to take a hard look at that. We need to take demand-side management extremely, very, very seriously. We need to start now, and there are basic, simple things that everyone can do to bring down the peak demand. And that would knock off the need for several generation capacity. Which, mind you, our demand in Ghana is suppressed. What we are even complaining about is heavily suppressed. Our industrial sector is not functioning. So if we want to grow as a country, we're not talking about even the 5,000 that we're talking about. We need maybe double that.
Wow.
So if we don't introduce efficiency, then we won't be able to match the demand and the supply. Everything is suppressed in this country.
Yeah.
So going forward, let the government, let the stakeholders take the decisions they need to take now.
Yeah.
And you and I, as consumers, we have a role to play. We have a part to play. Let's manage the demands our side of the equation. Let's make sure that as much as possible, let's get efficient equipment. Let's do what we need to do on our part to help curtail and solve the problem. And let everybody play their role. Otherwise, we're not going to get out of the situation.
Mr. Fletcher,
It's
your
almost
last
like
words.
he has
Everybody
said
is expecting to hear your last
everything
words.
that I wanted to say. But maybe same thing, but said from a different context. That one, on demand side management, it's important that we understand that if we are wasting 30 to 40% of the power that comes to our homes and our factories and our offices, if we are wasting them, okay. What it means is that if we were not wasting that 30%, let's say power that goes out is 1,000. If it's 30%, and I'm being conservative, 300 megawatts is waste. We are shedding load because of 300 megawatts. What it means is that if we were not wasting 30%, we wouldn't be shedding load.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. And so we have to take it serious that we also have a role to play. I'm saying that you can tell me that I'm paying for it so I can waste it. No, we don't need your money if you are going to waste the power. We don't. But he said also tariffs. Tariffs are not, first of all, they are not cost recovery. Well, from the VRA perspective, they are not. But secondly, they also it doesn't make the business attractive to the independent power producer who wants to come in. Because you know what, if today you wanted to go into energy production, the first company you probably will want to talk to is Asogli. You have been in this business as an IPP for a long time. As part of your due diligence, Asogli, how is the business? And they'll tell you, you know what, tariff, not good. But on top of that, ECG is not paying. That immediately puts you off. You're like, okay, I can put my money somewhere else where I can get the return on investment and on time. So tariffs have to be cost recovery at least, and so that it will make it attractive to others. But my final word is that, to be honest, and this is my personal position, given what I know and what I have seen, I know we will get out of this situation. I don't know whether I can use the word very soon, but we will get out if we do things right, and I know that from the VRA perspective, things are being done right. Projects are lined up, but they require, like I said, patience, understanding, hard work on our part, and investment.
So soon, we've come to the end of our discussions. You've heard the experts very well. Number one, we don't need your money if you are going to waste the power. Number two, we will get out of the problem very soon, in quotes, if we do the right things.
Well, I said,
but
I don't know whether I can use
the right things. The right things are so relative. Who does the right thing, we will see. But until we meet again, the debate continues. Thank you very much.